Hey, Jon here, live from SSW TV and Sydney, NDC Sydney 2018. Welcome to Ask Me Anything. If anyone in the audience or on the live stream wants to ask a question, please ask or go to the stand there. Today I'm joined by Jon Galloway, who is the Executive Director of the .NET Foundation and a Program Manager on the .NET team. Jon has been developing software since the 90s, has written several books, and is a top speaker at Microsoft Virtual Academy. Jon, thank you for joining us at the SSW TV.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Jon, I've read that you started in the Navy, and now you're working for Microsoft. So, can you tell us a little bit about your story? Because that's interesting.
Sure. Well, so when I was in high school, even just in grade school, I loved computers, but I never thought of it as a job. I always thought that people that actually did computers for a living, you know, wore white suits and worked in banks and just, I just thought it was boring. I thought it was very, you know, like lab coat sort of thing. And so, but I always played with computers for fun. And so anyways, I was not sure what I wanted to do for a career. I studied physics. I went to the Naval Academy, partly because in the US, if you want an education without a lot of student loan debt, you get the military to pay for it. So I owed them 5 years after graduating. So I was on submarines for 5 years. And it was really interesting. Growing up, I hadn't really traveled much. So it was great to be able to travel. It was a lot of work, but it's the kind of thing you can do when you're young and you don't need to sleep. And so, and you know, it was interesting as a young, you know, barely 20-year-old, like, you know, supervising a reactor, you know, during reactor startups and stuff, you know.
That is great.
Yeah, so it was also fortunate for me. It was a good time to be in the U.S. military because we weren't fighting anyone at the time. So it was, you know, it was a lot of drills and fire drills and, you know, practicing to make sure we knew what to do if someone shot a torpedo at us in the middle of the night and all that. But it was, so it was exciting, but it wasn't scary.
Right. And then how did you come to work with Microsoft from this?
Yeah, so I got out of the Navy. I had saved up some money. I called it the Galloway Freedom Fund because I was sure I didn't want to be in the military, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I thought, well, I'm just going to study computers because they're fun, and then maybe I'll figure out my job thing after that. And so I was just reading about computers, and people were like, well, you should, you know, start applying, whatever. So my first job I actually applied to, I talked to somebody, it looked like an interesting thing, doing desktop applications and stuff. And the guy said, well, we're not really hiring. And I said, well, I'll work minimum wage. I'd just like to learn, you know. I'd saved up some money. I was a single guy, I didn't care. So I worked there a couple of years and just did all kinds of, you know, desktop and web applications. After that, I worked at, I don't like to move jobs too much, but I worked at maybe 3 or 4 jobs over the next, you know, 8-10 years. And then Scott Hanselman actually contacted me and said there was a spot. And so I've been at Microsoft almost 9 years now, I think.
Cool. And congratulations.
Yeah, it's been fun, and I've worked at a few different positions inside of Microsoft, but always kind of focused on, you know, digesting what's happening inside of Microsoft, learning the newest exciting stuff, and then kind of explaining it or you know, translating it hopefully to people that are outside of Microsoft. And sometimes that's you know, here's a bunch of undocumented stuff, or here's a bunch of stuff that doesn't really make sense, and here's how I'd explain it to you.
Cool. And now you're Executive Director at the .NET Foundation.
Yeah.
What does that exactly mean? I mean, it is very cryptic for everyone.
So when I first started, that was one of my first things to do, was learn how to answer this question of what would you say you do here? And so software foundations are actually really important, but there's something most software developers don't know about. And the idea is, especially in this open source world that we work in now, so many of the libraries and projects and things that we depend on are built by 1 or 2 people. Or, you know, with maybe a few contributors, but it really just comes down to 2 or 3.
What happens if they go away, right?
Yeah. And you know, I worked for a project manager once that said, I don't like to say hit by a bus. What about wins the lottery? You know, so what happens if one of my favorite libraries, the lead developer, wins the lottery and he takes off and he's no longer developing the project? well, I would be sad, and a lot of other companies would be sad, or maybe they won't use those libraries because they're scared that this one person is going to stop maintaining the library, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And then especially now, as we have these rich ecosystems where multiple projects depend on each other, it's all kind of a little bit of a house of cards. One thing goes away, and what happens?
Like LeftPad.
Exactly.
A while ago, yeah. Then the whole thing crashes, and then yeah. So that's the point of the foundation.
Well, so the main thing that the foundation does is it says it holds intellectual property. So people donate a project to the .NET Foundation, and the .NET Foundation, basically writes up licenses, does things in a way where it says, look, we're not going to steal your project away. You still have all the rights to maintain it, to do everything, to keep moving it forward. But if you go away, if you stop maintaining, if a new contributor needs to come on board, whatever, we're able to add those projects. Right. And then by doing that, we're able to do a lot of things to support those projects. So things like, as an open source maintainer, I have to mess with things like getting an SSL certificate for my website, or I have to pay for all these different services, or I have to, that's difficult. Or say if I need a contributor license agreement for my project, and I have to set that up. So what we try and do is have kind of a back office system for all these projects, where when a project joins, we say, now that you've joined, here's all these services we can do for you.
So you choose from a variety of services that you provide, and you can pick in whatever you need.
A lot of them are kind of standard and we expect them, but for others it's like, hey, if you've already got all the code signing certificates and things you need, you're good, But if you need something, we can help you out.
Cool.
And some of them are case by case. Sometimes we've had things where, we've had some open source projects that had been run as a partly commercial, partly open source, and the commercial part wasn't completely working and they needed some help. We said, hey, we can pay this, we can pay for your hosting for a short amount of time, or whatever it is, So, so a lot of it is kind of jumping in where we see places we can help out.
Cool.
And one other thing with that is the range of projects includes all of .NET. So all of .NET Core, the Roslyn, all the compilers, all that is under the .NET Foundation. So Microsoft actually has hundreds, maybe more, of developers contributing to .NET open source, and all of their work that they do every day, they contribute that code to the .NET Foundation. So it includes Microsoft's contributions, and then a lot of other companies, and then a lot of those other important projects that are built by the community. And Jimmy Bogart here has contributed. He and his team have contributed AutoMapper, and there's just tons of these projects that are. Have a good long-term vision, that they've been around for a while, the community really cares about them, and so this is something where we've added a lot, and we're continuing to try and add them as quickly as we can. We've got a lot of people saying like, hey, what about my project? And it takes some time to do all the
to get that to the list, So you said that people get interest in the projects, and the projects that join the foundation are the project that the community care about. So is that how you pick the project? How do you apply to begin with? How do you apply to the .NET Foundation? How do you say, I got a project, it is really interesting, I got like 3 downloads, but it is really interesting, can I join?
Right.
Is that how it works?
Well, so a lot of things do come in just socially. People ping me on Twitter or email or at a conference, and that's fine, that's great. There's also things where there's larger things where a larger company, often, Microsoft wants to create a new project, and I'm working with some right now that are, working to announce. And then there are others where, like Pivotal company donated Steel Toe, which is a kind of a .NET microservices library, and it does all kinds of stuff around that. So there's no kind of, these are the 3 things your project needs. It really does need to have to be case by case. Sometimes it's a new project or library, and there's strategic reasons why this is something it's going to be important. There are others where it definitely does help when I talk to someone and they say, hey, my NuGet package has 16 million downloads, and I've contributed 99% of the code. Or sometimes they'll say, hey, we have a team of 20 people around the world, we've built this great thing.
Different scales, different.
But so we really try and look at, is it something where it's of important and growing value to the open source community? We don't want to be a dumping ground of, hey, we're done maintaining this project, we want to throw it over to the foundation. That's not what we are. So it really is something where we are holding, and supporting projects that are growing and have a long-term vision.
Well, yeah, I guess it depends, right? Imagine some big projects, important for the community, is held by a single guy, and the guy says, "Look, I don't want to maintain this anymore." Then you would take it, right? If it's important.
So
for
we
the
would
community.
help, but we really an important thing, and I don't think it's always clear, is we don't have developers working in, like, I'm not able to maintain your project, right? And we don't have a staff of programmers waiting away for, hey, send us a project and we'll maintain it.
Yeah.
So we can try and work as a matchmaker, and we can go to the community and say, hey, we would love some more people to work on this project. But if there's a project, even if it's a really cool sounding project and there's no developers on it, it's important not to be a dumping ground of unmaintained projects, because there's a quality problem then. People say, hey, all these .NET Foundation projects are unmaintained and not useful. And we really want people to see the .NET Foundation as kind of a stamp of, hey, this is something I can invest in.
That was my next question. I mean, I wanted to ask, why would you join the .NET Foundation? I mean, you got all these services, the back office services, but, well, you can find some other way to do it, right? But it's also about the quality, right? It is also a seal of quality, and you can go somewhere and say, hey, my project got approved by the .NET Foundation and is maintained by the community. Right?
That is something, and we have seen that when we talk to projects, that they say, hey, we went in and talked to this large financial company. They're interested in using our project and in hiring us to do some additional development, and it's great for us to be able to say this project is supported by the .NET Foundation. So yeah, I think the main things are that one top level thing is the intellectual property, kind of holding that. Two is so that the project is not just run by one or two people, it's supported by a foundation. Two is all the services, and it includes the technical things, also includes like legal support and other stuff. And then three is just that kind of being able to say, hey, we're part of the .NET Foundation. And that is really, I think, pretty helpful for projects to just be able to say, hey, we're a serious thing. This is not something we're just hacking on our weekends. This is something we really want the community to know they can invest in. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one last question about the foundation, though. Who owns the project? Who owns the code? Because you give it to the foundation, but then who is the owner of the product?
So that actually is a longer answer than you would expect. So there's two different ways that people can donate projects to the foundation, and one is where they grant a license to the .NET Foundation. It's a special, irrevocable, blah, 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 like all the lawyer terms like license, but that allows the .NET Foundation to kind of maintain it where, well, the company itself or the contributor still kind of holds the original copyright. The other way, the other model is projects actually donate, like it's a donation. They give the source code to the .NET Foundation, and then the .NET Foundation licenses it back to them.
Right.
Honestly, it's more like legal stuff, and it's things that we involve lawyers to help kind of explain. I work with some amazing lawyers that are great people that can speak English, that are like, that they can help explain things. And so that's, those are important questions, but it's something where usually that's only something we figure out when the projects are donated, and then from then on, it's usually we're not trying to take projects over. I don't have the time or energy to try and like be fiendish and evil.
Even the need, right? It's just not what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah. So really, the projects are, I like to say it is the projects are supported by the .NET Foundation. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I've been to your talks here at NDC Sydney, and you've been demonstrating a lot of new features for .NET Core, and old features from .NET Core 2.1, but that are underused, that people don't know about. I was the first one to say, hey, this is a cool feature. I never knew about it. I'm gonna try it. But there is a lot of features, right? There's a lot of new features, and it keeps growing. And how do you keep up with that? How would you recommend the users, the devs that don't want to make the jump into .NET Core? How would you help them? How would you support them to get all of this and find out what to use and what not to use, and how to keep up with all these new features?
I do feel like that is some of the job of conference speakers. That's part of what we should be doing, is not just saying here's something new and shiny, but giving a bigger picture and telling a story. And so that is sometimes a place where, like, I really try and think when I'm giving a talk, what's something I want someone to remember in a week or a month? You know, like not just how can I impress people right now by writing some code really fast. I think that we do try and be very open with people. Like, for instance, if they go to this ASP.NET community stand-up, it's at live.asp.net, and we take live questions. So that's a place. And then, you know, connecting with us like on Twitter or whatever, and saying, again, that's somewhere where I try and be pretty, you know, communicate quickly on it. It is difficult. It is hard because on the one hand, people need and want new features, and on the other hand, it's like a tidal wave of it's like so much, you know. So I do feel like we have regularly, like there are large conferences. There's Build. We just did .NET Conf, which is a virtual conference, was last week, and Dan Roth did a presentation on what's new in ASP.NET. Dan is a phenomenal speaker. I love watching him, and so I feel like he did a great I feel like he did a great job kind of summarizing things. But yeah, I do feel like there's a balance between Microsoft is always, you know, telling you, hey, here's these neat features, and then you as a consumer have to look at it and say, here's what I want.
I don't need that. Yeah.
Here's what's important to me. You know.
Exactly. That sounds cool, but I don't really need that.
Yeah.
Or it takes too much time to just get it running into my projects.
Right.
Because in real life projects, sometimes you don't have the time to invest all this, you know, knowledge and just get it up and running. I'll move, but I'll stay with my old ways.
Yeah.
That's the bias, right? If you ship too much new features at the same time, then, you know, people are not going to use them straight away.
So I do feel like it's good when there's kind of a theme or a story behind something. So for instance, like the new version of ASP.NET Core, there's kind of a theme of microservices and doing things that'll help you build APIs and services. And so then conceptually for me, I can think about it and I go, oh, all right, this, you know, if I'm thinking about microservices, I should check out those blog posts on ASP.NET Core 2.2, you know, and that kind of thing. So that is helpful, as if I can kind of put it in a box of here's the general. I guess the one other thing that really helps me is the docs. The docs for Microsoft products, .NET Core especially, has just gotten really good lately. They've put a lot of work into it. They continually update it. And I love that I can go and make edits to it too. Anyone can, you know, quickly on GitHub, you can make updates.
It is much better than it used to be. It is much better.
So I feel like there's some, you know, where kind of the top level pages will link you down, and they have it kind of organized to, okay, I'm concerned about security. Here's the section of the site where I can read more about security.
Yeah. And you should read these articles and then go down and that's a very nice thing.
It's a hard problem. It really is. I mean, as software developers, I feel like actually writing code is one of the easiest parts of our job. Some of the harder parts are like, well, dealing with people and communicating effectively is one, and then just managing this huge overflow of information. It used to be that you had to go buy books or you had to go seek information out.
Yes.
Now it's just pouring at you all the time, and you have to be able to like have a page fault way of learning where you go, I'm not going to learn everything now, but I know this thing is out there. I know that I can go look it up here.
Yeah, it's not about knowing the things. It's about knowing where to find the information and how to find the information really, you know, really quickly and efficiently. Yeah, I do agree, because we're overflowing with information.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. So, what are the new features that you're excited about in .NET Core 2.2 Preview 2? So that's a lot of twos, as you said.
Yeah, it is a lot of twos.
Is there any highlight in there that something that really you said, that's really cool. We've been missing this thing.
Yeah, well, let me see. I like the overall, so like some of the previous versions, there have been like, here's kind of a grab bag of a lot of different things. I do like that this new, with 2.2 Preview 2 and 2.2 in general, is kind of this web service, like it's a full package. So there are things in there, for instance, like if you want to build good APIs, you need things like health checks. You need to be able to, you know, maintain and make sure they're up. You need to be able to describe your services so that other people can consume them. So they're working on things with Swagger documentation and Swagger client generation. Nice. So you know, there's a lot of things continuing to build out analyzers. So analyzers are in Visual Studio. I can go in and it'll show me errors. It'll say, hey, well, it'll show me warnings, and it'll say, you defined your API like this, you really should, if a GET request fails, you should be showing this HTTP response, or whatever it is.
All right, like kind of a linter for
exactly,
and you get this real time. So it's real time.
As you're developing, it'll say, hey, you really should be doing this. And one other thing that's cool on top of that is, okay, it's neat to show me all these errors, but what about if I just had some conventions that would just do things the right way for me from the start? So with this, they've added in these conventions where I can say, use these general conventions for my API, and then it'll look at it and it'll say, okay, you did a GET request that failed, this is your HTTP response, and it'll do some of those things. So a demo that I like to do is, step one, turn on the analyzers, look at all these errors.
Add the things.
Yeah, and then I can say, okay, here's all these different errors. I can start going in and fixing them, or I can just put this convention on and they all went away.
Done. Oh, this is great. This is great. Yeah. Well, so with all these automations and all these, like NSWAG, for example, that generates client for JavaScript based on your description, this analyzes and automatic conventions, plus machine learning, plus AI, aren't we going towards the whole myth of, hey, computer, do my software? Aren't we going slightly towards this thing?
It's funny. I don't know. There's
sounds like it, right?
Yeah, it does. I feel like we're hopefully moving up these levels of abstraction where we're not. I think of it in terms of like web development and how I used to fight with CSS and I used to fight with JavaScript to make it work all the same and all the browsers and things. As those kind of basic things get more standardized and work better, then I can get down to those levels, but I don't have to quite so much. So I feel like too, maybe with like we're talking about microservices and all those things, I do still like to be able to dig down into the code and fix something if it's wrong. I like an error message. I don't like a sad face. I want the actual error message. I want to be able to get down and fix it. And I love, I don't want to take power away from people. I guess that's
right. But this is right for like people that have been working in this industry for 5, 10 years, 15 years, right? But new devs, the one that just jumped on the industry, they won't ever know about these little fine-tuning things. Yeah. They will just see this abstraction level and will, just like the way I don't know about you, but I never dig into like coding my own C++ library because performance and stuff. It was already abstracted to me. So. Like I think the next generation will be just abstracted all these fine tunings and things. So
it's a fascinating question. It's really interesting because I think there are different types of programmers, and some programmers really love to learn. They want to know all the rules. They want to learn from the bottom up. They want to learn C++ and memory management and all that, and then they want to go. And they feel uncomfortable if they don't know that much. They don't know everything that's going on.
They don't understand the whole, not only the big picture, but like all the details.
They want to know every single gear and every single thing. On the other hand, honestly, I'm not sure if I'm naturally this way or just because I teach this way so much, but I like to say, let's start simple. Let's build a website. Let's look, what does that website look like? Okay, now let's change this one thing. Let's change it from, hello world to hello John, and go in and say, and so I like that kind of go from the glass down, as Scott Hanselman wrote a post on this, but it's like the kind of, understanding at that level and then digging down as you need.
And dig where you need, right?
Yeah.
That way you don't need to understand every moving parts of the whole thing, but you can understand just the right thing you need. Yeah, I do work like that.
I feel like too, it's really at this point almost impossible to know everything that's going on under the hood. Dylan's keynote the other day, he talked about all the things that happen just for me to send you a cat picture from one phone to another. And it's an hour-long talk just for that one thing. Now let's build a complicated microservice that's going to transfer money between multiple banks or whatever. Forget it. You're never. So I really feel like conceptually, if it makes you feel better to think you understand everything that's going on, that's great. But you don't.
You'll never get everything. That's right. Yeah. That is interesting though, because the education. When I was back in the engineering school, like IT engineering, they were trying to teach us everything. So from, from like machine language to and stepping every single layer up to like abstractions and then or object oriented and then moving up, but you don't have the time to do everything,
right?
And these days it gets more and more complex every day, and but in the same time you got all these abstractions and these helpers that for example in .NET Core, right?
I feel like it's important to learn. I'm sorry for jumping in. I'm
no worries.
I think it's important to learn how to get to the next level down, how to handle an error message, how to ask for help. And I feel like if I have a limited amount of time to learn or to teach someone, I would rather get good at problem solving and finding those answers rather than spend days on code structure and all the keywords and all that. The languages change, the applications change over time, but the kind of skills you learn as a programmer, those are always how do I fix? I've got a bug, I've got an error, I've got a feature I want to implement. How do I do it? Yeah. Yep. This is fascinating to me too because I've got an 11-year-old daughter that's genuinely. I've got 3 daughters. 2 older ones, I tried to teach them coding. They didn't care. They're like, that's neat, Dad. Go do your nerd thing, whatever. My youngest daughter is fascinated by programming. And
really?
She loves it, yeah. She's got a Jewel bot. She likes to do things with MakeCode on Minecraft. She's just...
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And
cool.
So it's really 11, fun.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's very early.
And it's really fun for me to experience programming as a new programmer through her eyes and see how the mistakes she makes, the things she tries to do that I'm sure I tried to do on an Apple II computer back in the day, that kind of thing. So,
Oh, cool. All right, changing completely the topic. Oh, not that much actually. So, back in the days we had like isolated web services, and then we went to these conventions of APIs, and now APIs are everywhere, and now we're going microservices where APIs are talking to each other. So what do you think is the next step towards the overall architecture of the web development? What is for you the next step of this
thing?
Wow. It is Ask Me Anything. So
yes, it is.
Asking
You're asking the hard questions. I was hoping you'd just make me factor prime numbers or something. It really depends on what you're building. I do feel like a lot of the microservices, thing is more of a realization that we've always been depending on multiple services.
It is convention, right?
Yeah.
It is like formalizing what we've always been doing.
Yeah. So I do feel like, it is a thing where we're building on top of. I built the .NET Foundation site recently. I made some updates on that. We did a new design, and I realized, wow, we've got multiple APIs that we're calling, and I didn't even really think about it, And same with the website for .NET Conf. One page has maybe 3 APIs that we hit. So I do feel like it is something where it definitely is becoming part of how we're developing now. We're using software as a service APIs. We're using all kinds of composing our applications.
It is playing Lego, right? Just plugging things to each other and just works.
And I feel like some of that is the way that we're doing that is now becoming more. Our expectations are, this is how a website should work. This is how I should, if I'm going to use your service, I'm going to sign up, you're going to give me an API key. Like these are kind of more standard things now. And so I feel like the kind of general structure of how we're doing things is getting to be more, like we're not having everyone solve problems differently. And it is also really cool to see the rise of things like Azure Functions, and being able to do like these kind of just tiny slices of computer time. So, for instance, the ASP.NET or the .NET Foundation website, we do project search where I can look up. I would like every project that is for mobile, or so I want to look at, and so I work with a developer, a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft, Anthony Chu, super sharp guy, and he built up this thing using Azure Search. And so we're pinging off to Azure Search to get these search results and getting back JSON data and blah, blah, blah. But the interesting thing with it is the source data actually comes from GitHub repos. And when a new project joins .NET Foundation, they send us a pull request. We accept it. We get back JSON data with other links to other things, markdown files and all that. So the cool thing, the way that Anthony implemented this, is he used an Azure function. and a webhook. So when I make a commit to the repo, when I accept a pull request, now that Markdown and JSON and all that stuff is available, a webhook from GitHub pings an Azure function. The Azure function updates the Azure search, and then tells me it's done, and now the updates automatically.
I can find it.
So it's immediate. So what's really cool with this is hooking these parts together, using APIs, using search and functions and all that. And the GitHub and the GitHub webhooks, it sounds like a lot of stuff, but it actually is beautiful. It took me a little time.
It's just configuration, right?
Yeah.
There's pretty much no code in that.
No.
You just say, hey, right, pick the information from or maybe passing the JSON and then
there's a little bit, but it's so much better now than it used to be. Where previously we actually were parsing stuff and doing all this. Now it's like throw it out there.
Yeah, I say parsing, but you see what I mean.
Yep. So,
so do you think we've reached the maximum level of architecture that we can get, and API is the top level thing, and then there's not going to be any radical change of paradigm in the overall architecture? That's a hard one. Huh?
I know just enough to know that I can't predict more than a few years out on the web. It's really interesting. I do feel like moving things out, decentralizing is something that's becoming more common. I do feel like we're going to start hopefully taking more advantage of browsers in smart ways. For instance, like PWAs, portable web applications, and doing things with service workers and all that kind of stuff, where we're actually able to not just right now. It's a single end. I go to I hit a website. The website hits a server, and the server pings all these APIs. What if we're actually able to, from the browser, do some more of this API integration too, right? And use local storage, and it gets complicated, but it also can improve my experience. I
can see some. There's some room for improvement in this.
That
is a good answer. That is a good answer.
I honestly though, it's really hard. I love keeping up with the web and web technology, because people are trying all kinds of crazy things. And most of them are horrible, and a lot of them, happen to be good. Or maybe they're horrible now, but 4 years from now, as computers get faster, they're better, So
right.
It's and then, this is just, I don't see the application of it yet, but I was talking last night to Seth Juarez, and he's looking at machine learning and quantum computing, Q# and stuff, and it's like, how do we optimize things in an intelligent way so that our web servers, our web applications, are we writing code differently, or are we doing things where our APIs are self-organizing in a way, and Skynet?
I'm pretty sure it's going to be this way. I think things are going to be, organizing themselves based on machine learning. They're just going to get the connection, just like neurons works, right?
Yeah.
Just get the connections better. The more you teach them, the more they get. They optimize themselves.
Yeah.
Pretty sure we're going that way with the development,
yeah. It really could be interesting. I still feel like we're a ways out from, as I write code that fails when I miss a semicolon, then I wonder, it's maybe a little ways out for code that writes itself or whatever. But I do feel like there's a lot of stuff where I'm interested to see. For instance, I hooked up something with ML.net. Recently, I was looking at some samples for it where they had machine learning, and they're pointing it at sales data on a website, and they're forecasting future data. So I go into a report, and previously the report just said, here's historical data, and now it shows, here's what we think will happen in the future. So that kind of making it easier to start doing some of this machine learning, and
it is super easy these days.
Yeah.
It is much easier than it used to be. It is pretty much anybody with basic coding skills can jump into machine learning these days. I find it amazing, because the more people get hands on this kind of technologies, the more applications we'll see. So it will just enrich the whole environment, and
And it's kind of a self-repeating thing, where as it gets easier, more sites, more apps, more applications will start surfacing these sorts of features, and then customers will demand them, and then everyone will have to start doing it.
And then you have to know more about it, and then this cycle. Yeah. All right, we got a little time to ask another hard question.
Okay.
So what is the next smartphone? What is the next device that people will use?
Oh boy. It's funny. Smartphones have been a little bit boring for me over the past few years.
Really?
I mean, they're great. They for instance, Smartphones over the past few years, they get a little bit better pixel density, or they get. No, I mean they're amazing.
There's been some quite interesting, like improvements, like big improvements. Like waterproof, they get waterproof.
Waterproof is good.
Now you can split on Android. You can split screen and have two applications. That's kind of.
It is good. Big. I guess a lot of those things are things where I got a new Android. I got a Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus, whatever it is, 6 months ago, and shopping for the features, I'm like, oh, I definitely want that. But day to day, I don't know that I use all those things so much. I think the biometric login is very cool. Mm-hmm. I do feel like the faster they get, I guess what I'm saying is, a lot of the things seem incremental. The things that we really use, the pixel density, the camera quality, the battery life is big, the CPU, but all those things are kind of just moving up.
Incremental, yeah.
And so I don't know the next kind of boom thing, that's going to be like, oh, everyone needs this.
Do you think it's going to be, the visors like Google Glass or HoloLens? Do you think this is going to be a thing in the future?
Yes, but I don't know how far out we are. So I'm probably a boring, cautious futurist. If you're going to ask me, I've been hurt too many times. For instance, recently I got one of these Windows mixed reality things. It's a Lenovo thing. I love it. It's really fascinating. It's also huge, right? And it hooks up to my computer, which also needs a large
power.
Yeah. And so, for sitting at my desktop, I think this is great. This is something where I could really after I get over a little motion sickness, but I can see this being really useful. And I spent a while. The most interesting thing for me was exploring around the world. And there's a thing where you could go to, I went to Yosemite, where I'd been recently, and I was like, oh, I was just here, looking around,
This makes sense.
So that's neat, and I feel like there's some applications where we can build where multiple people in the same place, and what would a conference be like if half of these seats are filled with virtual attendees or whatever,
But this is not a day-to-day application. I mean, like virtual conferences. I can see that being a thing, but I have really big problem with a constant UI in front of your eyes. I think Richard Campbell was talking about this earlier yesterday, I think, or whatever. And he said something that really, that makes me click. How can these visors thing become a real day-to-day thing if you're gonna get Candy Crush in front of your eyes when you're walking in the street? That won't work. So.
That's difficult. And I feel like, I've read, what's his name, Michio Kaku, he's written some futurist stuff. And, other people have talked about when it's something that's contact lens style, that's you don't feel
augmented
weird,
reality, more than virtual thing or
honestly, I'm terrible with names, and I feel like if you could just show me someone's name when I'm talking to them, I would prefer that over glitzy 3D animations.
But then it gets scary, right? Because then you can get into recording everything and Black Mirror. You see where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
This is really scary.
It's interesting. But I feel like. It's hard to know how that all works. If it's glasses, where does the processor live? Google Glass was interesting, but
a backpack.
Yeah.
Or in your pocket. Look at the processing power of your.
That's true.
Your device.
Yeah.
Or in 4 or 5 years time, this will have the power of your machine, your PC that you're plugging your.
And if Bluetooth's fast enough, and then the batteries work,
done.
It's it's interesting. I guess. Like I was saying earlier, I thought that I had a lot of fun putting on the VR glasses. And then also it was okay, that was cool. I don't know if it's something I'd...
Yeah, you do, yeah.
I still need to see the day in, day out application. For me, honestly, show me people's names, show me maps, show me that kind of stuff. The augmented reality, that could really be interesting for me.
Yeah, I can see augmented reality becoming a thing in cars, for example. I think Parrot, the company, the French company, well, it's not because I'm French, but the French company did something in augmented reality device that you put in your car, and it's plugged to Google Map, and then it displays in real time the line thing, the blue line thing on top of the road, so you know where you're going. You don't have to look at your phone or whatever to see the.
That sounds great.
That sounds like a good application.
As long as it doesn't show me ads, because that's my most frustrating thing. popping
and then you
ads
got
up when I'm
pop-up,
driving. It's like, no. Yeah. It's you know, I love talking to Richard, like you're saying. He's fun because he's got this kind of, here's where things are going. I can see glimpses of things, but I really don't have a good feeling of how long it's going to be. And I feel like a lot of the things that we've been teased with, and we think it's coming in 2 years, it's more like 10.
Just like flying cars, right?
Yeah.
We've been waiting for the flying cars for like 20 years, so 30 years. Yeah. All right, do we have any questions in the audience or in the live stream? No. Thank you very much. Yep. Can you stand there, please, and get the mic?
Please not factoring primes. Please not.
My name is Pankaj.
Hi.
I have a question with .NET Foundation. I just wanted to ask you that what kind of projects does this .NET Foundation support? Is it just Microsoft ecosystem of languages, or it's open source like JavaScript or different libraries out there? So any developer can submit any type of project, or it's just related to .NET?
That's a great question. So it is not just Microsoft projects. We definitely have some that are, you know, community, whatever. It is .NET focused though. So we really do, in order to really, there are lots of software foundations out there. There's Node Foundation, there's Eclipse Foundation, there's Linux Foundation, I could list dozens of foundations, right? And so there are times where we don't want to be competing with, and we don't want to be pulling people into a foundation that doesn't make sense for them. So really, we are focused on .NET ecosystem. There are cases, maybe if there's like a JavaScript library that was very focused on .NET development, maybe, but really it is focused on .NET and the .NET ecosystem. And again, it's just, we want to be like focused on one thing and doing it really well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, this is great.
That was a great thing. This was Jons signing off for SSW TV.